is a discussion and consideration of legislation affecting the university enterprise, and I'd like to welcome Paige Gonzalez to discuss our legislative affairs portion of the agenda for the 2023 legislative session. Thank you, Paige.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Hi,
Yes.
thank you. Chair Manson, Regents, University Presidents. Nice to see you all. This is our first legislative update of the 2023 session. This is the third week of session. As of this morning, when I left the office, there were 886 bills introduced. But next week, both chambers are in deadline mode, so there will be many more. There'll probably be a flood of them dropped, which is why today I'll just be brief about what we've seen thus far. We are not asking for any positions today from the board. We thought it would be best to continue to monitor, utilize the existing policies, positions that we have to maneuver through and see what's out there, what's likely to move. And we anticipate needing to come back to you probably with a longer list of bills in the coming weeks that may or may not need action. So far this session, Director Arnold gave a presentation to the Senate Education Committee regarding Arizona's state of attainment and workforce. Also, John and the universities presented information about the Teachers Academy to a sub-approps committee. And then the university president spoke to both chambers appropriations committee, and in the House, each were met with applause. So I'll cover the bills now, and you should have the list before you. The first two bills you see in your packet are a result of the direction that you provided us in November with the legislative package adoption. The report streamline bill has been introduced by the Senate Education Chair, Senator Bennett, and the clarification bill regarding veterans tuition scholarships and surviving spouses has been introduced and sponsored by the Chair of the Military Affairs Committee, Representative Payne. Lastly, you authorized us to support, if introduced, the return of the Smart and Safe Fund bill, which included our campus police, among other entities, into the Smart and Safe Fund distribution. And you will see here that that has been introduced, so we will support that. There are a handful of bills that have been introduced so far that contain appropriations, new programs, policy changes. I'll just have a few highlights presented for you here in the Senate. There is a bill related to free speech zones on campus, a bill prohibiting public entities from entering into contracts with companies that discriminate against firearm entities. That was introduced last year as well. And two bills that expand the Promise Program and the Veteran Military Spouses Tuition Scholarship to private post-secondary institutions. In the House, there are appropriations bills related to U of A's cooperative extension and on-farm efficiency grants, and a bill to appropriate monies to ASU for a collegiate women's wrestling program. There is a bill to establish a law enforcement tuition scholarship, also with a $10 million appropriation. In the House, there's a repeat bill from last year related to student activity fee exemptions, a bill establishing a criminal justice academy that's similar to the Teachers Academy, a bill expanding the Teachers Academy to private universities, and the reintroduction of a bill from last session related to critical race theory in K-12 schools and teacher prep programs. Just to note, we expect more bills could come related to dual enrollment and other issues. So again, we'll come back with more bills, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. And to conclude, the back and forth between the executive branch and the legislative branch related to bills, budget, executive nominations, and procedural rule changes demonstrate that the first few months of session will be a significant challenge. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Regent Penley.
Just one comment. Thank you for mentioning the dual enrollment bill that's coming.
Thank you.
Some of you know that I'm a strong supporter of our expanding dual enrollment, particularly to rural parts of the state where AP programs don't generally exist, and also to lower income areas where, again, there aren't AP programs and kids can't afford the AP programs, even if they were offered. So this is a way to increase, I believe, the high school graduation rate and to increase college going rate by getting kids to understand that, yes, I can succeed in a college course. And we know from some preliminary ASU data that kids who take these dual enrollment courses do better in subsequent courses at the university. It's limited research so far from ASU, but at least suggests that we're doing the right thing by supporting dual enrollment.
Thank you, Chair Manson, Regent Penley. And when that bill is dropped, we expect it to be dropped next week. We'll certainly share that with you and we'll all see what it looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. The last item on the board's agenda today is a request to approve the investment service providers for the Arizona Board of Regents optional retirement plan. And I'd like to invite Chris Okazaki to introduce this item.
Hello. The board offers an optional retirement plan, a voluntary 403B plan, a supplemental 401A plan, and a 415M qualified excess benefit arrangements plan to university employees in addition to the ASRS plan. This past fall, the retirement work group issued and evaluated an RFP for our retirement record keepers. The board is responsible to approve the vendor for the optional retirement plan. 2 proposals were received from our current vendors, Fidelity and TIAA, and we are asking the board to approve both as vendors for ORP as required by statute so we can proceed with awarding the contract. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, I move that the board approves the investment service providers for the Arizona Board of Regents optional retirement plan as presented in the executive summary. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion does carry. So this concludes today's special board meeting. We are adjourned and we will now move to the Academic Affairs Committee meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon
You
to
have
everyone.
to move to the front.
Oh, I do? I like this seat. I'm all set up.
Not anymore.
Jessica and I will miss you too.
Yeah, desperately.
Don't eat my mom.
I was lonely.
Yeah, that's right. Now you've got company. Thank you, Madam Chair. The main event today, of course, which I know you've all been waiting for, is the Academic Affairs Committee. I see we have a full house in keeping with the excitement of our agenda. I'd like to call our committee meeting to order. A reminder that only members of the committee can provide a second to a motion, a rule which I violate with some regularity. Live stream of the public meeting. What did I have for lunch? Live stream of the public meeting is available to the public on youtube.com or at the ABOR live link. Today, our agenda is full. We are going to start with the discussion of the U of A's general education crosswalk. After that, we will be discussing the restructuring of our ABOR committee organization. We will then be reviewing and recommending for board approval NAU's enterprise-wide metric targets and forecasts and the university's institutional metrics, and we will conclude with 2 board policy adoptions. Our first item of business is to approve the consent agenda. The committee has 3 items on the agenda, which includes items 8 through 10, so those are in front of you. I move that the committee forward to the full board for approval, items 8 through 10 as listed on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we're asked to approve the committee meeting minutes from the November 3rd, 2022 meeting. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I move that the committee approve the minutes from the November 3rd, 2022 Academic Affairs and Educational Attainment Committee meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Hearing none, the motion fails.
Be quick, I guess.
Yeah, moved and seconded. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is a review and discussion of the University of Arizona's General Education Program Framework. To refresh the committee's recollection, as part of the board's direction to revise and improve general education, the University of Arizona was asked to develop a general education program framework. The board approved that framework, and based on that framework, the university has developed its general election program and its curricula. The crosswalk in the board materials provides a narrative of how the university's general education curriculum fulfills the board's general education requirements as set out in our policy. Provost, there she is on the screen, Provost Folks and members of her team are available to answer the committee's penetrating questions. Before taking questions, however, I would like to call upon the esteemed provost if she'd like to make a brief statement of introduction or provide the committee any additional information or context. Provost, floor is yours if you want it.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent Duval. Thank you, committee members. It's an exciting moment today as we present the crosswalk, and I wish only that I could have been there with you in person. I regret that today I had a clash and had to host a very significant research meeting here with our Air Force collaborators, and I couldn't be in two places at once, or I couldn't tunnel up there fast enough. We were talking about quantum technologies this morning. But I am actually incredibly excited to bring you up to date on where we are with our general education refresh. The first phase of our reformed general education curriculum was implemented in 2019 with a process to that the board directed us to engage in revising our general education requirements to include clearly identified concepts, skills, competencies, and intellectual habits as described in the policy. In 2020 and 2021, we moved into the second phase of the project, working closely with the Arizona Board of Regents. The board approved our general education program framework at the June 2021 meeting. And in what we think of as the third phase of this process, each university is working to develop courses each university, I should say, will be working to develop courses that satisfy the requirements that was set forth in the framework document that we put together. We are happily on the leading edge of this process. The University of Arizona is just a little bit ahead of our sister institutions in this regard. So we're proud that we are the first institution to bring to you the crosswalk, which is the document that aligns the general education framework with the actual courses that are being offered to meet the general education requirements. And we're asking for your review. We welcome all of your penetrating comments. I will give a special shout out to Dr. Susan Miller-Cochran, who's there with you and who is going to take over the presentation from me. She and her team have done just an extraordinary amount of work to pull this crosswalk together to share with you, and importantly, have been working really tightly with the staff and at the Arizona Board of Regents to make sure that we're doing an effective job of communicating what we're trying to achieve as we operationalize our new general education program. With that, I'm standing by for questions also, but I know that Susan's moved to the table and is ready to start her presentation. Over to you, Susan.
Right. So thank you so much, Provost Folks. And I didn't prepare a really lengthy presentation for you today because I know we're short on time, and I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time to discuss the items that the Regents wanted to talk about in our general education program. But the two items that were provided to you are, of course, the crosswalk, which Provost Folks described, and then also a description of how we're approaching the American institutions part of the curriculum to give you a sense of where we're at with that and how we're operationalizing the different items within the policy and turning that into learning outcomes that we're using within our curriculum to make sure that you had some detailed description of that as well. But I did want to also make sure that I acknowledge the many, many faculty and staff, literally hundreds of faculty and staff who have helped work on this changing general education, as I know all three universities know all too well, is kind of a Herculean effort. So we have had hundreds of faculty who have either participated in focus groups, in discussion about the curriculum, who have gone through our training for redesigning their courses to fit the general education curriculum, and then many staff, including those in advising in the registrar's office and different areas of academic administration, who have been tremendous partners as we've worked on rolling this out pretty quickly. And we're really delighted with where we've landed on it. So with that, I'm happy to respond to questions that the committee has.
Susan, thank you. Provost folks, thank you. I would just go first to say, look, we know what a big task this has been. It has been years in the making, and the extensive consultation with faculty is so appreciated. And you can in one sense never do enough, but you got to get the work done. You got to get the job done, and you did. I'm reminded of the miner's canary. The miners used to push the canary down the shaft, and if it came back alive, then it was safe to go in. I want to congratulate you for going first, and because you'll serve that role. And I think what you've done is a template of success, and really appreciate your good work. So, Regents, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I want to echo, I understand. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times when we have mentioned to other boards or things that we have worked on Gen Ed, and the response has been seriously.
Yeah.
So I do recognize that this is a big lift for the universities. We hadn't done it in quite some time, and so I really appreciate the efforts that have been made. I wanted to focus on the American institutions. Obviously, that's been kind of a bit of a pet project. And I appreciate the amendments and additions that were made from the first draft to what we got in our packet today. I wanted to make sure that I understand a couple of things. First of all, just overall, outside of the American institutions, you have reduced the number of courses that qualify for Gen Ed from somewhere in the 750 range down to the 200-ish range, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I think right now we're closer to about 300.
Okay.
But yes.
But for me, that is well done. Part of the objective of redoing this was so that, as much as I hate to say it, students couldn't cherry pick their way through this and avoid what they needed to learn or what we wanted them to learn. So I really appreciate you making that effort. I know that takes a lot of scheduling and class redesign work. As far as the American institutions, I want to make sure that I understand, and I want to say publicly, so it gets out publicly. What you have done here, I believe, and confirm for me, please, is that you have essentially the requirement. The American institutions requires 2 courses. One is a breadth course, which is developed and taught by multiple faculty. Same course, which covers all of the topics within the American institutions requirement. The second course being a more in-depth course where a student could choose a particular area of the American institutions requirement to get a deeper knowledge in. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for the most part, yes.
Okay.
So just with one clarification, that first course, the course that provides breadth, we wanted to make sure that we had an option, or not an option, but a course that covers all of the areas within the policy. And so we looked through our general education courses and the courses that are in the queue for being in general education, and identified 3 that look like they would adequately address all of those areas. I want to provide the caveat, though, too, that those courses would need to go through the review process, vetting them to look at American institutions, and we're still finalizing what that description looks like. The language that you have is the one that we're working with right now.
Okay.
But there would be a team of faculty who are vetting those courses to make sure that they do indeed meet all of those different areas. 2 of those courses are in political science, and then 1 is in the history department in US history.
But essentially, all students at U of A then would take one of those 3 courses.
Yes.
Perfect.
Mhm.
That was
Yeah,
what I wanted
that's
to
the
make sure I
intention behind the
understood.
proposal.
We ended the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that that's a difficult process as well, to find a limited number of courses that actually
Yeah.
crosswalk the whole thing.
Well, and I know, of course, that this is the area of general education that is newest for all 3 campuses, incorporating this into general education. So we have taken some time to make sure that we're involving the faculty, that we're doing it well. We want to make sure that our approach to it is really supporting teaching and learning, and that students, what they're learning in that introductory course, then we wanted to be able to scaffold that learning so that they're building on it in the second course. And one of our principles in the redesign of our general education program is that we wanted general education to be more relevant to what students are interested in, what they're doing in their majors. That was some of the feedback we kept hearing from students, that it felt like just a checklist of classes. They didn't really understand how it connected in any way with their major. And so we've tried to be very intentional about that, incorporating a lot of reflection, and then trying to help guide students in their selection of courses so that those courses do indeed align and they can start to reflect on and see connections with their majors. So that second course, going more into depth, what we're hoping then is that students can select something. It might be something like a basic economics course. It might be an introductory course in constitutional law, but something that goes into more depth in one of those areas of the policy that might connect in a more significant way for them with what they're studying in their major.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So can I just do a follow-up on the chair's question? As you reduce the courses, does it cause you infrastructure compression around whether or not you can get this enormous number of students into a fewer number of classes relative to classroom space and faculty capacity?
Well, I should be very clear that with the reduced number of courses, that doesn't necessarily mean a reduced number of sections of courses that are offered. So a lot of the courses that we have in general education, there are multiple sections taught by different instructors. So for example, the Poli-Sci 201 course, which is American National Government, there would be many people teaching that. So one of the things that we've implemented in our new general education plan as well is every course that is in general education had to go through a re-evaluation process, a redesign process to fit the curriculum. The faculty proposing those went through a 2-week training that we offer that we call Quick Start. It introduces them to the principles of general education, the outcomes, to make sure that their courses are aligned. But not every person who teaches general education will have gone through that because they're not all proposing courses. Some of them are just assigned courses. So we have a version of that that provides an introduction to general education that's reduced, so it takes out the proposal part of it, that introduces them to the principles of general education and to what needs to be taught. So if a course meets a particular requirement, here's what the learning outcomes are. Here's what needs to be covered. So that each person who's teaching those courses will have a sense of what the overall objectives are for that area of general education. And that's something that's brand new for us, that all of our instructors in general education for the fall semester had participated either in the more lengthy Quick Start process or in that introduction to general education.
Thank you. Regent Penley.
Thank you very much, Chair DeVoe. A couple of things. First, I just laud what you've done. I know it's taken hours and hours and hours to do all of this work. I also laud the extent of engagement with faculty. There's always a very big tension, and Regent Manson addressed it a little earlier, between what a board can do in its desire to raise the quality of the educational experience of students and the responsibility that faculty really have for their coursework, for the programs, the academic programs that are put together. Indeed, as a result of President Robbins' invitation, Regent Mata and I met with the WASC accrediting team. And I don't know whether it was a third or half of our time, but a lot of our time was spent, how did you all do this? This general ed stuff is amazing. And they were both amazed at the extent of the discussion on campus at the university of the general ed courses, the knowledge that faculty had in a very widespread way about what was going on here. It was just, to them, extraordinary. And to this board, they said, goodness, boards don't take this on. How did you do this and not have major fights over it and increase the tension? And what Regent Mata and I tried to tell them is, first of all, we've taken a long time to do it. We've done it collaboratively, we hope collaboratively, not with the provosts I'm seeing in front of me, but with your predecessors from the very beginning, and tried to focus on the quality of the experience of the students. But they were both complimentary about what you have done at the University of Arizona and how impressionable they were. And also compliments to this board for sticking with this, initiating it, and really reaching the conclusion that we're seeing here today from the University of Arizona. So it really was you could probably add Regent Mata, but it was a delightful conversation, all positive for you all, at the university and positive for this board.
Thank you.
Question.
Yes, Regent Herbold.
I want to make sure that I understand how to read this. If I look at, for example, page 11 of this big grid that lists the 250 courses, I assume. If I understand this correctly, I can take a course called Wicked Tales and Strange Encounters, and I can take a course called Mind Altering Substances, and I have satisfied the fine arts and humanities qualification. Is that true? Am I reading it right?
You are reading it right, Regent Herbold. I do want to clarify with those courses, the faculty who have proposed those courses, I know sometimes they select titles that will seem appealing to students in the catalog, but the faculty who have proposed those courses are very serious about the subject matter. And in those two cases, one of the areas that we've emphasized for those courses is perspective taking. So in the case of a humanities course, every course that satisfies that humanities requirement has to make sure that students understand not just the content of that course, but what does it mean to take on the perspective of a humanist? What does it mean to engage with the world from that perspective? What kinds of data would humanities scholars look at? How do they interpret that data? How do they come to conclusions? And we do the same thing with social sciences, natural sciences, and the arts. And so there's a broad range of courses in terms of the content, but all of those courses meet the same essential learning outcomes. And that's one of the things that our faculty in the University-wide General Education Committee have spent a tremendous amount of effort ensuring. The number of hours they've spent reviewing courses is unbelievable. And I'd say a large number of the courses that have come through that process end up being sent back to faculty, asking for revisions, asking for clarification before they approve those courses. So I feel pretty confident in the ability of those courses to meet those requirements.
I'm surprised that you haven't relied more on technology, because to me, you've proven that it's almost impossible to do what we set out to do when you have a school as large as University of Arizona, because you have to have, tens of sections of each of these, fundamental courses to do it right, in my estimation. And obviously you said, no, I want to stick the traditional mode of having the courses that these people are used to teaching and somehow force fit all this to work. That's what's leaving me very uncomfortable, saying, I wonder if we really need to step back and say, hey, clean sheet of paper. Creativity needs to be applied here in terms of what would you do to educate, students in the hardcore principles, for example, in American institutions. Now, what we want, and I think that to me, it's a very, very difficult task that you have taken on to try and force fit this. And I just wonder if we're completely missing it in terms of saying, okay, clearly we need a different business model here in terms of instilling this knowledge in the heads of these students. How do you react to that?
I see that Provost Folks has her hand up.
Good.
I'll let her respond first.
If I could jump in here, Regent Herbold, I would make two clarifying comments. One is that we are not in the least bit ignoring the advent of modern technologies that might give us a broader reach or a more uniform approach. Those technologies are multiple, I would say. Some of them, which I suspect you're hinting at, but you can tell me if I'm on the wrong track here. Some of them involve such things as online delivery, for example, at scale. So a sort of a MOOC approach. I will say that what we know about online education is that it isn't always optimal for the 18 to 22-year-old age group if we want them to complete degrees in 4 years. So I will sort of quickly say we have that as options all over our curriculum. It's not necessarily something we're looking to scale aggressively for this cohort of students that are in this traditional immersive campus experience. I will say, though, that behind the materials that Susan has shared to you, there's been enormous use of technology. So Susan and her team have both applied at-scale training methodologies for our faculty that we're onboarding into our general education process to ensure that the students are having a set of unified learning experiences that will deliver outcomes across the spectrum. That actually has been incredibly powerful, but more than that, there's also an incredible deployment of technology on the assessment side to make sure that as we roll this forward, we know whether students are meeting their learning objectives or not at the course level and at the program level, and that we can course correct if we need to.
I didn't get any of that from the materials.
Well, as I said, that's kind of on the machine side of it, not on the sort of policy and strategy side of it. But good point. We can add some extra text.
Okay, thank you.
I must admit, when I saw Wicked Tales and Strange Encounters, I thought it was a political science course on the state legislature. But, so my bad. Other questions, comments from Regents? Regent Penley.
Thank you, Regent Duvall. When we undertook this effort, we also called on the three universities to not just have a general education that was generic and like all other general eds, but one that was distinctive for your university. So perhaps this is more a question to Provost Folks or to President Robbins. How does this general education really represent what the University of Arizona is all about? What is it about this that is exemplifying its brand?
So if Susan will forgive me to jump in here, at the heart of the general education program is it is the embodiment of our effort to transform the students who come to us from the K through 12 system from being knowledge consumers into knowledge creators, and be able to do that across a breadth of disciplines, and importantly, to be able to work in the interdisciplinary spaces. As everybody in the room knows, I am sure, almost all of the fun, hard problems that face us lie at the boundaries between the traditional disciplines. This general education program is our effort to craft graduates that can address the challenges of the future by being able to clearly work in those interdisciplinary spaces effectively and efficiently as they become the knowledge creators of the future. So I don't know whether that's a little, does that sound too lofty? But that is what's behind this.
Lofty is good. Questions, comments, others?
I like the Wildcat experience and the Wilma, experience.
Yes.
So I thought it was well done.
Thank you.
Terrific. Sure. Oh, yes. Andrew?
If I can interject, just actually removing my ABOR staff hat for a moment and putting on my U of A faculty hat for just a second, because I went through this machine that Susan talked about earlier back in my interlude post-provost when I was regular faculty. And my own courses here under the natural scientists, you'll see Geography 230, the changing climate. And I went through the 2-week boot camp and all the rest of it and proposed it and had some tough comments on what to do with my course. And it was fun teaching once we went, and it was an excellent experience. But I wanted to address actually one of the things Regent Herbold brought up, which is that a sense of square pegs being forced into round holes, or I forget what your analogy was. But I do want to emphasize that in general, faculty are really eager to propose courses and to bring a part of the curriculum forward to join Gen Ed for all kinds of reasons. And one of which is that in most disciplines, they would like to, of course, attract students to their own discipline that they're part of. Most students don't know what all the disciplines do when you look under the hood. And so it's a chance to do that and attract majors. And for students, it's really important to see what those choices are and to find what it is they can do. Maybe even pick up a minor or something else like that. And then the second point I wanted to make was, actually, if I recall correctly, Regent Herbal, you have a background in marketing, and those course names are plain and simple marketing for 18-year-olds. They are to draw them in and get them attracted, and just like all the products I know you marketed, Procter & Gamble, there was real quality behind each of these courses too, but sometimes you've got to get cool titles to get people in the room, and that's by and large why you'll see some of those title names in there.
That was well played, Andrew. Very well. Even Herbold is laughing.
Weird stuff.
Well, Andrew, it can also work the other way. I can talk about the fact that I'm going to talk about civic engagement. And what I'll really talk about is mind expanding substances. So, it can go the other way also.
Terrific. All right. Anything else? Yes, Mr. President.
Could I just comment on the process? During the strategic planning process, I thought this was one of the great areas that we were going to make headway at the University of Arizona. And after a year of sitting in a conference room like this, I gave up. I mean, I thought we needed courses that every student that graduated from University of Arizona was going to be financially literate. They're going to be health literate. And people said, they're 20-year-olds. They're going to just Google, what to do if they have a sore throat. And I said, that's exactly the problem. We need to teach them some courses, some critical thinking courses. And, it didn't quite make it off the cutting room floor into the strategic plan. So I've often thanked Provost Folks for taking this on as a major project, and certainly hiring the right people and empowering the right people, including Greg Howman you see there. But Professor Miller Cochran is someone who's taken this on, and I don't know how many times you've testified at the Faculty Senate, but it was much more difficult than this body, believe it or not. And last Faculty Senate meeting, this is something that I haven't seen in 5.5 years. She got a rousing round of applause from the Faculty Senate. It came very close to a standing ovation, but just a rousing. So she turned everybody around, even our Faculty Senate. So I would just say thank you and well done.
Bravo. That's a great report. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for a great report. Thanks for being our canary. You've survived the shaft, and you're out singing
I'm glad
free.
to report that I have.
Yeah.
So, and thank you for the wonderful questions too.
Thank you. We will be having the same conversation, obviously, with NAU and ASU in coming weeks, and so I look forward to that. This was a discussion item only, so thank you. We will move on to our next topic. The next topic, item 3, is a discussion on the ABOR committee restructure and reorganization proposal. The board has been thinking a lot about how it can do its work more effectively and efficiently. John will be taking a few moments to update all of us on the latest developments and thoughts about this topic. And then we'll have a discussion about it. So John, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. So this is a follow-up conversation that really started last June at our retreat in Flagstaff of how do we spend board time more effectively. As we've looked and thought about this, there's really 3 areas that drive topics that come before the board. One is state law, state statutes. There are a number of topics in law that are required to come before the board. Retirement plan management being one of them that we just experienced. Board policy and bylaws requires a number of things that come before the board. There's a plethora of things, and those are largely transactional that come before these committees and then to the board. And then finally, university or board initiatives where we want to accomplish something new. Historically, the board has dedicated significant agenda time to those items directed by policy that are traditionally transactional, and those transactions are driven by strategic decisions and long-term planning, but generally only come to the board as transactional items, not the planning items. And so what we've discussed is how do we reverse that, make sure the board is engaged in the long-term planning and strategic discussions, understanding that transactional items will come as a result of those initial decisions. Less emphasis on those transactional items, more time on the strategic items. So there is a lengthy document that is part of your materials. I don't want to discuss all of it today. Some of it is kind of far-reaching and a little more ethereal. But there's some fundamental structures that are in there that I was hoping to review with you and then get feedback. We'll have another conversation at the February meeting. And then in the April cycle, we'd like to bring policy changes forward that really implements this new plan. So first, there's three elements I was hoping to discuss today. One is the committee structure that we're proposing. Two, how do we use board meetings? And there's a proposal in there around that. And then three, a concept that is a little bit outside of our standard board structures, but part of board governance, and that is really individual regential assignments. That's really part and parcel of this whole restructure. So part one, committee structure. Please interrupt, comment, raise your hands whenever. What we're proposing is to reorganize the board into 3 standing committees. And we can debate names and what we want to call them. We need good acronyms because we always just refer to them in I don't know how.
You don't want to say acrimonious, but.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I'm like, I don't think that's the right adverb, but anyway. But in summary, the committees we're proposing is one, really a transactional committee, where we take transactions, whether they be an academic transaction or a finance transaction, and we have a single committee that addresses both of those. So far, the feedback we're getting is we want to keep most of the transaction we've been dealing with. We just want to isolate them so that we can deal with them in a single committee. What we find is that often the necessary trumps the important. And so if the board has to deal with several transactional items, we have to deal with those transactional items, and it chews up all of our opportunity to discuss the strategic items. We're really trying to isolate those transactional items into a single committee. And then two, secondary, we would have almost an open forum committee, a discussion committee. We throw around the word strategic a lot, and I don't love it, so I don't know what else to use though. Just have a strategic discussion, long-term planning, whatever you want to call it. I kind of like the idea of open forum committee, where we can bring forward items either from the universities or from this board to discuss what do things look like long-term, whether it be admissions policy or financial aid policy, or how do we want to impact areas of the workforce, long-term needs of the state. Committee reform would be a great discussion item in that committee. Those two committees, and then we would keep a risk committee. Right now we call that an audit committee. The way we're considering using that committee is that it would meet once a year, likely in June, and the purpose of that committee would be to review and make sure there's board assurance that the risk management tools that the universities have are being employed correctly. So we would look at internal audit, we'd look at enterprise risk management and other risk management tools, make sure those are functioning at the university level, continue to ensure independence of our internal auditors. But that would basically be the role of that committee. We'd remove some of the current functions of that committee to really shrink it down. and I just want to reemphasize, it is important to get this committee structure right, because all of our policies are tied to committee flow. And so to implement this kind of change, Jenny, there are dozens, maybe more than dozens of policies that we're going to have to come and review and update and vote on over the next couple of months. So it is difficult to go through that process. So especially for you younger board members that are going to have to live with this for the next several years, please want to make sure this is the structure you're looking for. So I'll pause. Committee feedback, questions?
I have a question. We have 4 committees right now, and 3 of the 4 is going to the first proposed committee. Do we still have that binder for each of the areas that is in that first committee? We still have to read the amount of information because we still have to understand what is going on. Can you clarify that?
Mr. Chairman, Regent Mata, great question. The way we envision it is 2 pieces. So the committees that are going today, I just went through and counted it up, and apparently I didn't write it down when I counted it up. But, you know, I think there's about 20 items on the agendas today, and I think 7 of them are non-transactional. You know, that things that would be in the discussion committee and not in the transactional committee. So it's not that we're taking all of the health committee and academic affairs and business and finance and shoving it into one super committee. We're really just trying to divide items by their nature. Are they transactional? Are they strategic? So then the second thing we're looking to do, and we've been trying to do that more this year, is the use of the consent agenda.
That was my second
So we will have, and we'll have to rewrite some of our policies to allow for that. But we have a number of capital items on the agenda today that probably could be handled on consent. And what that allows is for staff and or regents to say, you know, this capital item, we need to talk about that. So let's make sure that's on the discussion agenda. These 4 other capital items that are a result of all the strategic discussions we've done over here, we don't really need to talk about that again, because we already understand it. We've made the decisions that led to that capital decision, so we don't need to revisit it again. Like next committee, we have a lease adjustment for the University of Arizona that's going to allow them to park overnight on a property that they already lease. I don't know that needs committee time for us. You know, does that really elevate to this body? So that's how we're going to try to manage it. It'll take us some time, I think, to balance that. You all have this terrible habit of being endlessly curious and interested in the business of the universities. And for the most part, regents really like the transactional items. They're interesting, they're concrete, you know, you can wrap your arms around and make decisions, and you like to vote on stuff. You check it, so they're tempting, and we're gonna have to get past some of that.
Yeah.
Thank you. But to be clear, we will also continue to have the board briefings,
Yes.
which give
Yeah.
every regent the opportunity to ask a question about an item that would be on the consent agenda, to either ask that it be pulled off or to ask for clarity, so that if they have any questions about it, you know, it can remain on the consent agenda, but the questions have been answered previously.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, another good example is academic programs. You know, ASU is going to bring between 100 to 200 new academic programs every year, maybe a few less than that. Again, I don't know that we need to discuss all of them, but I forget the title. Is it Wicked People in Strange Places? Or,
Weird stuff.
yeah, that one we may want to discuss for a few minutes. You know, but you know, keeping intact our policies that require those things to come to the board will allow us to assess what which ones need a public discussion, so which ones can just move forward without committee time.
Thank you.
John, if I might, I just want to reflect on this for a second. So, and this is a little bit redundant with the conversation we had in Flagstaff at the retreat, but it seems to me our primary goal is to reverse the three things we do in this way. Currently, we spend most of our time on what I would call the maintenance bucket, the second amount of time on the defensive bucket, which is managing a crisis or communications or things of that nature, and third is playing offense. And the goal is to reverse those so that we have more capacity, more time, and more attention on offense, systemic leadership. That requires more time, which is what you're talking about. It requires, frankly, a lot of self-restraint on the board's part to sort of have a filter as to what is worth the most precious thing we have, which is board time. Getting a lot of busy people together is the most precious thing we have. But I also think what gets me excited, I think it opens up an interesting possibility. In compressing the number of committees, you then have more regions that don't have a committee leadership role, but you have regions with incredible capacity to lead. And how do you unleash that? And as you think back over, the last couple of decades of this board, think about some of the bigger initiatives. I mean, the first strategic plan was Bob Bola's idea. The idea of whatever became of it, but the U of A, ASU combined new College of Medicine was a Gary Stewart idea. Took the presidents to Alaska, didn't give them a return flight until they landed the ship. That was a regional idea. The whole idea of enterprise and the EEC was an Anne Mariucci idea. It was just her idea, and she said, I'm going to sort of drive this. You think about any number of examples. Karen Taylor Robeson on the Regents Cup. Been my experience with the ATA, Larry with dual enrollment. I mean, sort of each of us have these things. And what I am hopeful and what gets me excited about this structure is to unleash individual regions in alignment with both board goals and their own proclivities and talents to both be more effective and, frankly, to make this very time-consuming volunteer job more rewarding, to do things that leave you with a sense of accomplishment and purpose and legacy, and in the process, pick up both the pace, purpose, and impact of our board work. So, I mean, I want to, see this as a tool of unleashing our full potential, both as a board and as individual regions. And John, I think what I've heard so far nails it.
Yeah, I think for me, what it does is it blocks off time for us to talk about the important high-level strategic stuff that gets lost in the shuffle of the urgent. And I think it's really important, as we talk about trying to kind of stay at the 30,000 foot level, we have obligations at the 10,000 foot level, but I want to make sure, I think what this is going to do is it's going to block out that purpose and that time for the board to talk more deeply and more at length about the things that really move this enterprise forward and that can benefit the state.
Other comments before we go back to John? Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that it's important for all board members to use their time most efficiently, but especially for us as student regents, we only have 2 years in our term. And so I think that this is a really neat structure that can really give us a lot more of that bandwidth to put towards things that we find important. So I'm all for it.
Thank you. All right, John, back to you.
Thank you. So we'll move forward at the end of this, and I'll have to check with Chad, but we may be the only system in the country that doesn't have an academic affairs committee. Yeah. Second is, so that's committee time, looking for some feedback on board meeting time, and with the way we structure board meetings is less formal, so we can always tweak this as we move forward. We have, board meetings aren't dictated by policy per se. There are some things that have to come to the board, but we already have moved away from bringing transactional items to the board. All of those run through the board meeting on consent. We've tried to move away from third-party presentations, even report presentations from staff. We used to have a very nice cycle of reports that would come to the board, and we'd do a presentation on those reports, and they generally said the same thing that they said the year before when we did the report. This proposal really focuses board meetings more around established goals and reporting back both from the presidents and staff on where we're at in either at-risk assignments or our longer-term goals. So President Robbins could report out on where they're at on retention and what they've done and what does it look like, et cetera, et cetera. We're still proposing to keep the state of the university type presentations once a year from each of the 3 universities. But again, trying to refocus those more around the risks and the goals that the board has set for the presidents. Any thoughts on board meeting structure and how we can improve the use of that time?
Read silence as acquiescence.
Okay.
We're being restrained.
Yeah.
We're showing self-restraint.
Oh,
right
I see.
now, there you go. He's learning. So again, as we move forward, please, we can always tweak board meeting time and structure. So let me know how we can improve that. And then finally, just wanted to comment, and Regent Duval talked about using individual regents' initiatives inside of that committee structure. We also think it'll be important to use regents in either individual or 2 regent assignments outside of the committee structure. There are just certain things that we do that do not fit well within the restrictions of a committee that meets 5 times a year. So for example, communication strategy of the board and how do we better engage on that front. Really a lot of our attainment strategies and how we're implementing those types of items, our community outreach strategies. And then even when the board takes on a major topic that we discuss in committee, we may need a region or 2 to help us shepherd that topic forward. General education was a great model for that. The board took on general education and then assigned a couple of regents to really work with the universities to ensure that was moving forward in a manner that was consistent with board belief. I think legislative relations, budget development, that's the New Economy Initiative was really driven by Regent Penley and his leadership around developing that concept and how to approach the legislature. So I'm not sure if I'm looking for feedback on that front as much as I wanted to make sure regents understand as we look at this structure. We have our board meeting time, we'll have our committee meeting structure, and then we have this third element, which is individual regent engagement and assignments that will come through the chair and that will work with you on an individual basis. So if there's any thoughts on that, happy
Got
to.
one comment. When I was at Microsoft, I was shocked on our board meetings that we always set aside 2 hours in the afternoon with absolutely no agenda, and only board members would be there, no one else from the company or from the outside. You cannot believe how productive that is. But the notion of having 2 hours blocked out with no agenda is so counter to so many people, especially people who run these things regularly, that the assumption is, well, that's a waste of time. Oftentimes you find out that it's the best use of time. So I would, as you reconfigure the way we do 3-day board meetings, I can't imagine that there isn't an hour or 2 that we could use most productively by having no agenda.
Thank you for that great comment. It rings true for me. I am looking over at our open meeting lawyer to get Jenny's reaction. So we will have to have that conversation with the guidance of good legal advice, but it's a terrific point and an important point.
You can't just agendize it as free discussion.
No? Okay. Get innovative.
Important thing is to not invite the general counsel.
I think
that means it's not open.
Terrific. Well, John, thank you. Great report. In this month's AGB trusteeship, let me quote an esteemed university president who said, "Trustees have got to demand change and stop accepting things as they are. Trustees need to drive innovation." Michael Crow, Arizona State University. So here we are.
I don't know whether I take that as a compliment or a castigation.
Well, that's what board is he talking about? Terrific. Any other questions or comments on this topic, John? Thank you very much. All right, we now move to Northern Arizona University. Our topic is the one for board approval, and that is the institutional university metrics for NAU. The provost is here with her senior team. Welcome, and I anticipate that you've got some opening comments you'd like to make. Hope so.
Thank you, Chair Duvall. Thank you for the productive discussion of NAU's proposed institutional metrics that we had at the last AAEA committee meeting. Pursuant to your very good advice, we've streamlined the metrics to a set of 13, which sharpen our focus and enable us to measure how we impact or expand opportunity, promote upward mobility, and generate positive social and economic impact in Arizona and beyond. NAU will expand opportunity by increasing access to excellent post-secondary education at the undergraduate and graduate levels with a focus on locations and modalities beyond our historic center and Flagstaff, and an enrollment mix that establishes a healthy balance of Arizona and non-Arizona resident students. Enrollment metrics are indicative of our success in expanding opportunity and achieving that strategic enrollment mix. We will increase access and, equally important, increase success of Arizona residents, students who attend NAU. Student momentum is key to our goal of propelling upward mobility. 1-year and 4-year persistence measures progress of students in a way that complements traditional retention and graduation rates of specific full-time cohorts. The persistence measures capture all undergraduates, full and part-time, that have varied trajectories and momentum to graduation. 2 of our proposed metrics measure the impact Arizona or NAU has on Arizona's economy and on upward and economic and social mobility of our graduates. Our first impact metric centers on NAU's efforts to meet Arizona's workforce needs, the number of highly qualified graduates, and NAU's programs of distinctive excellence that are supported by the New Economy Initiative and the Arizona Teachers Academy. This includes our allied healthcare and behavioral health programs, teacher preparation programs, forestry, land management, and law enforcement ranger training. We will also track the percent of graduates in these fields who are employed in Arizona 2 years post-graduation. Our goal to strengthen post-graduation outcomes, among them is to strengthen post-graduation outcomes, and among them is upward economic mobility. And we are going to measure that using a national index of upward mobility. Inspired and energized by our new vision to be the nation's preeminent engine of opportunity, vehicle of upward mobility, and driver of social and economic impact, NAU proposes for your approval a slate of institutional metrics that will measure how we are delivering equitable post-secondary value to the citizens of Arizona. These institutional metrics, alongside our Elevating Excellence plan, will be the guiding frameworks for NAU going forward. We look forward to working with you and board staff to set targets for these institutional metrics. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. And before we have discussion, I just want to thank our chair and former chair, Regents Manson and Penley. You guys have put in an enormous amount of time and as the board representatives on the metric process, and thank you for getting us to this point. Any questions or comments regarding these metrics?
I just appreciate the adjustments that you made. You know, I think as much as we'd like to measure everything, once you start measuring everything, nothing becomes important. So I think narrowing the focus is helpful, and I think it'll put NAU in good stead.
Regent Penley?
Thank you, Regent Duvall. I was just really pleased. Back to the New Economy Initiative, you focus on it in 2 ways. You focus on the Arizona labor force by focusing on lower income kids that need to be moved into higher education with better jobs, raising the economic prosperity of our state. You also do so in looking at those specialized fields for which the new economy is going to need. So from a point of view of what we focused on before, these metrics address those issues, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for your leadership in securing those resources for us to do this important work. That's highly appreciated.
He promises he'll do it again.
I know.
All right,
Couldn't
other
do it
comments?
without you.
Yeah, comments or questions? All right, this is an action item. I move that the committee forward to the full board for approval, Northern Arizona University's institutional university metrics. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion
Oh, Fred,
carries.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I can't second.
Oh, I'll second.
Thank you. Okay.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded, and in the Arizona tradition, a revote. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Ayes carry.
Oh, you are on a roll.
Yeah, I think the ayes carry, but let me check the audit. Okay, next item is the enterprise-wide metrics. We are going to continue our work with NAU, and so the provost is here to talk about this, and let's start with an opening statement and then follow with questions.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chair Duval. Guided by NAU's strategic plan, Elevating Excellence, the targets and forecasts I present today on behalf of NAU were developed by a team of leaders from enrollment management, institutional research and analysis, student affairs, academic affairs, and the president's office. We're grateful to the regents and board staff for your valuable consultation in this process. This is your second review of our targets and forecasts. In the iteration you have before you today, we have extended the targets and forecasts to 2027. Today, I'll highlight NAU's targets related to increasing attainment, enhancing efficiency and affordability, and research. Enrollment declines prior to and exacerbated by the COVID pandemic will have a roll-through effect for the next few years. This bounds our targets and forecasts for enrollment and degrees awarded. Over time, we expect to see enrollment growth due to operational and programming changes such as access to excellence, the admissions pilot, strategic redesign of statewide programming, NAU Online, and the launch of the Arizona Attainment Alliance to drive positive trends for NAU enrollments, transfer from community colleges, and degrees awarded. NAU's commitment to be a leader in delivering post-secondary value means that we are laser focused on serving students effectively with the right programs and supports that enable them to progress to graduation with a degree that propels their success in career and economic mobility. We endeavor to provide excellence in academic programs and student services efficiently so that the outstanding opportunities the university has to offer are affordable and generate substantial returns on educational investments of students and their families. We've invested in targeted, multifaceted services for students with less academic preparation, including intensive advisement, learning and academic support, and designed course enrollment patterns to set up first semester students optimally for academic success. NAU's research investments will continue to yield growth in research and development expenditures as we move beyond the COVID pandemic-related disruptions. Over 3 years, we are targeting modest and consistent growth of research and development expenditures to exceed $71 million. Our fresh calibration of goals for research means that we focus on areas of excellence with high value impact on Arizona and pursue synergies between research and undergraduate and graduate education. Thank you for the opportunity to describe how NAU foresees our performance relative to ABOR enterprise metrics and strategic forecasts. I'm happy, along with our team, to answer questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Pugliese. Appreciate it. Comments, questions? All right, we're on a roll. Terrific. This is an action item. I move that the committee forward to the full board for approval NAU's enterprise-wide metric targets and forecast measures. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, we are on to the lightning round. Item 6 is a request for adoption of ABOR Policy 4-404, Arizona Leveraging Educational Assistant Partnership. Samantha Blevins is coming to the table to answer any questions that you all might have. Are there any questions about this topic? Okay, this is an action item. I move that the committee forward to the full board for first reading the proposed board adoption of ABOR Policy 4-404, Arizona Leveraging Educational Assistant Partnership. Is there a second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify with an eye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 7 is a request for adoption of AWAR Policy 4-501, Arizona Veterinary Loan Assistance Program. Again, Samantha is here to answer any questions. Any? Hearing none, this is an action item. I move the committee forward to the full board for first reading the proposed board adoption of AWAR Policy 4-501, Arizona Veterinary Loan Assistance Program. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify with an eye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Madam Chair, the Academic Affairs Educational Attainment Committee is now adjourned, and I think we are turning it over with about 20 minutes ahead of schedule, with a lot of self-restraint exhibited by Regent Goodyear and others, to the Finance, Capital, and Resources Committee.
Thank you.
Regent Pacheco.
Yeah.
Gold stars. Yes, your forced migration. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break.
Before we take a break, can we go into executive session?
Oh, of course.
So just
Oh,
open
yeah,
the
yeah.
meeting and take the vote, and then we have a break scheduled, then we can reconvene in the executive session.
This meeting of the Arizona Board of Regents Finance, Capital, and Resources Committee is called to order. We are in public session. We will be taking a quick break, and then we will convene in executive session across the hall in the executive conference room for legal advice, discussion, and direction to designated representatives regarding the item on the executive session agenda. Once executive session is over, we will convene for the public session agenda here in the Lincoln Conference Room. Do I have a motion to convene an executive session after the break? Second?
Second.
So done. Oh, all those in favor, thank you.
Aye.
Okay, we are now in executive session.
Somebody's paying close attention.
Yeah.
Hanging on.
We're gonna go across the other room, but it'll take about